Well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Julie, can you hear? Yep, excellent. So, we start with apologies for absence. What have we got, Eddie?
Thank you, Chair. I've got apologies from Councillor Rob Lee and Councillor Julie Hode. Councillor Julie Hode is attending online today, and Councillor Noble is subbing for Councillor Lee.
So, the minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are you all happy for them to be signed? Good. I've got a pen somewhere. So, the next item is public question time, and there are no questions, are there? No. So, come on to welcome you all here, and especially our guests, Chairman Michael from the Royal Mail, Gemma, who will be joining us later, and then our own Councillor Richard Wilson, who will be talking. So thank you all very much. Now, as an update, you may remember that we asked our MP Michael Gove to attend our meeting in November, but he could not attend then because of the COVID inquiry. We did ask him to come along to this meeting, but he's unable to due to the budget debate. So that's that. Surrey County Council have also declined our invitation, which is a great pity as many residents are concerned about the state of the borough's roads, potholes. Windlesham Parish Council were also invited, but they declined too. Then those are some of the updates. The next thing is the Accent workshop report, which the minutes, well, the sort of summary of that have been circulated. Okay, some of us attended that, and I think it says in them that we were going to ask them to this meeting, but we're going to ask them for June rather than then. Okay, so is everybody happy just to note that record? Yep. Okay.
We're not going to actually discuss the results of that meeting with Accent.
I was going to say, you can make comment.
You can make comments if you like, Councillor Rowlands. Yes, sorry? You can make comments if you like, Councillor Rowlands.
Is it on the agenda now?
It's not actually on the agenda, no. Yeah.
Circulated, wasn't it?
I was going to say, the way I would put it, Councillor Rowlands, is Accent are due to come in June. So if there are sort of substantial matters in relation to Accent, it's probably one to highlight for June. Was it something about the workshop in particular?
There were some comments on what was discussed at the workshop, which I thought was relevant.
Did you want to quickly mention them now? And
Okay. Suddenly appeared. It was, for instance, on 2.3 of the comments, the systems of dealing with complaints, which they don't seem to have sorted out completely. I had an opportunity to discuss it with a fellow councillor. They don't seem to have a coordinated approach to dealing with complaints and issues that are raised in that way.
Are there any other comments, Councillor Rowlands?
I mean, one of the issues is the non-response to complaints about housing issues. as far as Accent was concerned. In other words, there doesn't seem to be any coherent system they're operating on. And they seem to find a different reason each time to actually say they weren't responding. And that's what we're finding in practice. This means a lot for areas like mine with a very substantial amount of social housing. I mean, if you could summarise, it's the difference between what they were telling us at that meeting and the reality of dealing with this particular issue. We wanted to say it seems to be a schizophrenic society. On one hand, you're getting very positive responses, on the other hand, the reality of dealing with day-to-day issues of the conditions people are living in doesn't seem to correspond with that at all.
Well, thank you for that. What we'll do is we'll note those points, okay, and pass them on to Accent to be discussed or brought at the next meeting when they're here. Is that okay?
Okay, it's just I thought we'd be talking about it tonight as it was on an agenda item with the report that it spelled out.
No, we're just noting the report. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I want to take the opportunity, because of this and the fact that you've mentioned they're coming in June. It was mentioned at PNF, and I think it's probably quite relevant to bring it up now as a note, really. And I know I'm not on the committee, so it's just a request, really. I did a webinar recently about scrutiny and complaints, and bearing in mind it's a national webinar, one of the things that became really apparent was there was a lot of issues and complaints around social housing. And I know in the chamber, when we were discussing it with the portfolio holder at the PNF, I suggested that potentially this is probably the best committee to bring it to. It would be really helpful if they were able to bring a list or breakdown of complaints, not necessarily individual complaints, but a breakdown of the complaints, etc. I don't think it's relevant for PNF, but it's certainly probably relevant for external partnerships. So that's probably something I would just ask to note, if at all possible. Thank you.
Yep, that's fine, Councillor Garrett. We'll do that, and hopefully they'll come with that sort of thing. Yes, Councillor Rowlands.
Yeah, can I say, somewhat disappointed that there didn't seem to be our response to a whole range of issues. I'm looking at 8.1 to 10.1 in the report. There didn't seem to be any way that we had looked at all this and had come to any sort of view, which I think might be important if we meet Accent in the future.
Thank you. We'll note that, okay? Right, so following on from that, the other main update is Thames Water. And firstly, the Chobham Sang is in a terrible state, and this is due to Thames Water releasing sewage into it. So we do need to hold them accountable to that. Then we come to their response to the Camberley stink and their appearance at our last meeting. We asked them 5 questions to which they have not responded yet. These are questions like the long-term plan for the Camberley sewage treatment plant, the probability of a similar situation arising this summer, and when are the next scheduled odour surveys. So I think we'll note that and submit the questions again to them and see if we can get a response, pester them a bit more. Then we come on to the progress which has been made on the compensation agreed. The leader of the council wrote on February the 29th to Michael Gove and copied in Ofwat and Thames Water. You may have read this. If not, the main points are that Councillor MacDonald and our MP met with Thames Water on the 15th of January this year. It was highlighted that Ofwat advised that major incidents like the Camberley stink typically saw community projects supported as a form of redress in the range 50 to 100k. As both communities lost 6 months of their normal quality of life due to the stink, the least that should be given was 100k, or about £8 per resident. and this is dramatically less than a typical court fine imposed by the Environment Agency following on from a major incident, which Thames Water deliberately avoided at our residents' expense. So the leader committed to constructively engaging with Thames Water about community projects to ensure that both wards benefited. Thames Water did place an additional barrier to progress by saying any community project had to link to their business or the environment in some way. Then, you may remember, on January the 24th, there was the publishing of the independent Blue Marble report for Ofwat and the Consumer Council for Water, which was very damning of Thames Water's performance throughout the incident and clearly vindicates the position that 100k is the minimum redress acceptable. 2 equal value projects were proposed to Thames Water, one in each ward. Both would provide different ways to improve the health and well-being of residents, which seems suitable given the reverse happened due to Thames Water's deliberate actions. We were then informed indirectly that the maximum Thames Water would provide was less than 50% of the low end of the compensation range, e.g. 20k, which is about equivalent to a bottle of Coke per resident. This has been rejected as it is insulting to all the residents impacted, and basically we think that Thames Water should fund both ward projects proposed up to a maximum of 100k, in line with the top end of the Ofwat recommendation. The leader is still waiting for a response from Thames Water and Ofwat, but he's meeting Michael Gove in a couple of weeks, and this will be discussed then, because we are, as a council, committed to our strategy of campaigning for our residents, and I think you'll agree we all need to continue to pursue Thames Water for the correct level of compensation. Are there any questions about that or comments?
It seems to me that as this has gone on, we've backed away from what we were really seeking. I'm pleased to see we're back at 100,000 again. And, you know, the original idea was something tangible in the area worst affected, which is the Vale Road area, although there were problems associated with that. But I'm pleased to see we're back on 100,000 again, which is a reasonable compensation. But when you look at the officer time, the member time involved, there is a cost on that, and the preoccupation of the council on this one particular issue, which has gone on for some months. And of course, some recompense for that should be indicated. That has preoccupied us for a great amount of time, unnecessarily, because they're unreasonable in their approach to it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Rowlands. We'll note that. Okay. So, moving on, we have declarations of interest. Have we any declarations of interest? I didn't think we would have. So now, very pleased to hand over to the Royal Mail for their talk about the problems they've had and what they've done to solve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, councillors. Even in an age when letter volumes have massively decreased in the last 10 years, we've seen the postbag, the number of letters decrease from around 20 billion to just around 7 billion now. We know how many people rely on a reliable postal service. Camberley Delivery Office, which I know from the postbag that I've had from Michael Gove and from some councillors, you know, has had some issues. You know, it says 31,000 addresses. Each and every one of them, every one of you who lives in Camberley should receive a good service from us. And we let you down last year, and we are sorry. I think what is really important is you don't hear from me, but you hear from the Operation Performance Lead who took over the area from November last year, and let him just explain where we were, what measures he's put in place, the current state of play, and which will hopefully lead to a much more consistent service. But before we forget, I'd like to open an invitation to you as a committee to come and visit Camberley Delivery Office, to see the operation, to see how we are transforming as a business as we deliver bigger and larger parcels and fewer letters, and see the challenges that we face to deliver that service for you. And that is an open invitation to you as councillors. But I'll hand over to Ches.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody, and good evening, Madam Chair and Chancellors. So firstly, again, I'd like to apologise for the levels of service. We provided customers in the GU 15, 16 and 17 postcodes, and out of the GU area. We did not do well enough, and that's not the service that we want to deliver and the pride that we hold in ourselves as Royal Mail. I will not dwell on the reasons, which have been repeated many times. I'm keen to talk about what we have done to lift the standards across the GU area, and how I believe you can have confidence going forward with Royal Mail and in myself. So let me now explain what I have put in place, and since I've taken over the role as Operations Performance Lead in November. The GU postcode area covers 350,000 addresses, so it's no mean feat. It's served by 19 delivery offices. That's over 50 postcodes. We employ 1,100 people just in the GU area, with a fleet of approximately 576 vehicles. At Camberley Delivery Office, we delivered 31,000 addresses, employing 90 frontline employees. Pre-November, we were unfortunately suffering from a resource cap, a success rate of 52%. So that was every house, once every other day was receiving a delivery, simply not good enough. I was put into the position and instantly put measures in place in back end of November, where we reset the standards, recruited so we were fully staffed within the unit because they had a large gap of approximately 10. Sick leave was quite high at the time. We've driven that up by recruiting and actually increasing the morale within the unit, getting people back to work. Temporary resource was implemented to help boost deliveries in the GU area, and particularly GU 15, 16 and 17. And we've now seen 80% plus 90% deliveries every single day. I visited Camberley today myself, absolutely clear. I've taken some photos there, and again, open invitation to the committee. If you'd like to visit to see the changes that we've made in the GU Camberley area, then please do so. We also visited the site with Michael Gove, so he did visit back end of August, early September last year, and we visited last Friday. And Michael has posted on his social medias and fed back some really positive stories from residents, where complaints have turned around to a positive story, which is kudos to ourselves and makes us feel pride again back into the business. So I'm confident the measures that I've put in place will ensure that the customers will receive a consistent mail delivery 6 days a week when there is mail to deliver. And whilst I do not anticipate the sort of challenges that we have experienced in the past, if we do, we have implemented contingency plans for such measures. And I'd open the floor for any questions.
All right, thank you very much for that. And I think quite a lot of us may take you up on your offer to visit and see what's happening. I'm one of the people who was affected. So from June 2022 until, as you said, it has improved. We weren't getting mail regularly, once a week if we were lucky. And one of my questions was, at that time, I know that the round next to us, they were getting deliveries every day. And I couldn't see really why we couldn't get them every other day and they get them every other day. It seemed a little bit unfair that we were just getting them once a week or even once every 10 days. So if this was to happen again, would you do something like that?
No, so if we do have days where we have failures, there will be a rotation, so everybody receives mail at least every other day. Clearly that was not in place at the time prior to my leadership within the area, but it certainly wouldn't be happening under my watch.
I mean, Chair, that's something that we've do implement, where, you know, if mail doesn't go out and it's there today in Camberley, it would be made for sure a priority the next working day.
Right, thank you for that. I'm sure the residents are really pleased to hear that. I have one other question, because I know recruitment was a major factor. It was given back in 2022 as a reason, and again recently. And one of the posts people said to us was that you were only giving 20-hour contracts. And that was the excuse that this particular postman gave, that why we didn't get delivery, because nobody wanted 20-hour contracts. Is that true? Or
No,
not?
so it's far from the truth. So I've currently just got authorisation to actually employ and employ approximately 12 heads back into Camberley, which takes them above the current staffing post. This is to ensure that the service is delivered. There's no limit on the contractual hours of an employee based on around our full-time hours, which at the moment is approximately 37 or 40, depending on if we need them to do a Sunday contract. That will be down to the local customer operations manager to decide under my authorisation, but certainly not a limit on 20 hours per contract.
It's good to hear that.
I think also just one thing on the contracts, is there's a lot of noise sometimes about that, is when we went through our dispute, you know, we changed the contracts of new entrants. So existing employees at Royal Mail who were contracts did not change, because we wanted to introduce Sunday as part of the working week. New contracts going forward, so that would be advertised, say, in Camberley, would be to be 7 days a week. So it would be 5 days out of 7.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Thompson.
So thank you. Firstly, my ward is not in the Camberley area. I'm in Lightwater, GU18, and I have to first say that I think that the service delivered by Al Posty in Lightwater is fantastic, and he brings a smile to everyone's face on his rounds. So big shout out to him. I'd like just to ask a question on the every other day point. Is that the minimum sort of standard? If you go beyond that, then you are deemed to have failed, or is that the target? Should residents expect every other day, or should, in an ideal world, you get a 6 day a week service?
The target is 6 days a week.
Councillor Cope.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Chair, so you mentioned some contingencies that you've put in place going forwards to prevent issues in future if staff levels were to fall again. Could you expand a little bit on that, the sort of things that you're putting in place?
Yeah, certainly. So across the patch, so I manage the GU area. So I've actually got recruitment up to scratch. There was a large recruitment gap of approximately about 120 heads across the GU area. We have now closed that gap to around 10, which is average with the attrition that you get. But we've also kept a pool of people that I keep in my Goldswood Park location, and if we need to, we can divert resource, and we can divert resource from one unit to another. We have control to do diversions, and also an ad hoc resource, a temporary resource. We've contacted all of our external suppliers, and they are at the ready for dispatch of people if need be.
And I think just also to add that I know one of the questions that gets raised is, do we allow overtime? As part of that, there is the overtime there for colleagues who would like it, and depending on the age of the workforce, will in a particular location will determine whether there's the appetite for the overtime to be taken.
Right, thank you. Councillor Mears.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, Chair. You mentioned you've had a push on getting people back from sick leave. I'm acutely aware it's not unique to your organisation that you have lots of people on sick leave at the moment. Could you share some of the long-term adjustments you've made regarding keeping people back in the workplace once they're off sick leave? Thank you.
Certainly. So I won't go into too much detail due to GDPR with the actual people that are absent. However, it's actually just resetting of standards, business policies. So Royal Mail has got one of the best sick processes and policies in the industry, and probably in the UK. It's just absolutely managing that as close as we can, and treating our people as people, maintaining contact strategies, and also supporting them with our first-class health providing, which we have access to, which is Help at Hand and Feeling First Class, which Royal Mail operates. That's where they've got access, every employee, including myself and Michael, have got access to a GP 24/7, any mental health support, care, counselling, etc. Driving that drumbeat into the area really helps to support people back to work. Thanks, Councillor Mears.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question follows on from that. I mean, I know my particular, and I'll start by saying thank you because the service in my ward certainly has improved, and I'm having less complaints, so that's always a good sign. But our postie was off on, I think, probably long-term sick because of issues with limbs, etc. Now, I understand, or I was led to believe that might have been a case with a number of postal workers within Camberley. Is there a policy that if there is on long-term sick, you'll get someone in as a temporary fix, or how does that work? Because obviously in the real world, when you're walking all day, you're obviously going to have ultimately issues potentially. So how does that work from your mental health side of things?
In particular, with somebody that's struggling with walking, sorry, Councillor, I think your name's just moved. Sean, I'd see your first name. I don't want to turn around. So, in particular, with the absences and long-term sick, it's dependent on case-by-case scenario. So, it would be hard to answer as a broad spectrum, but I'll give it a shot. We will stay in contact with employees. Would we employ somebody like for like? If it does turn into long-term, yes, because we need to cover that round. If we have no reserves and annual leave is high. However, we do have structured into our structures enough people within, as in reserves for sick leave and annual leave, because you don't normally have both at the same time. So it will be a case-by-case scenario, but we certainly wouldn't steer away from employing to cover on a temporary resource for long-term sick. Thanks, Councillor.
Councillor Rowlands, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In preparation for this debate, I contacted the union, Communication Workers Union. The unfortunate story I got from them, and it bases on the present situation with the post office, was they felt they would be victimised if they sent somebody to this meeting to speak about their attitudes. I know they probably have a slightly different perspective from what we're hearing tonight. Can we have a guarantee that you're working to improve your relationship with the Communication Workers Union so that such attitudes which precludes a democratic contribution to, is restricted?
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. So my personal relationship with the Communication Workers Union is fantastic. I started as a frontline employee within the business back in 2010. So I've got very good relationships. Do not know who you're talking about in particularly. So without having that understanding, I couldn't really comment on that person's views.
But also, Chair, we've got through the dispute. We had a very tricky, 18 months, when our people striked for 18 days in 2022. And we, had a very tricky time in 2023. We've got through that. And it's now resetting, and gaining the trust from both managers and our people. So that we deliver a service, because people do have trust in Royal Mail. We would not be here now speaking to you about the service if we weren't confident what we were telling you was correct. And I visited there, as I would always do before I become and speak, about a particular delivery office. And I went there on Friday, and, the atmosphere was buoyant. People, the vast majority of the time that I was there of mail had gone out, and there was the pride there. There was flowers that people wanted to deliver for Mother's Day, and so I feel now we're turning that corner, which results in the improvement in quality of service. Because our people, are getting that pride back, and we're all working together, and I think that's really important that we forget and put aside what went on 18 months ago. And it's about working forward for the good of the business.
The response I got was from a regional officer. So he probably, probably the situation's patchy, isn't it? In some areas good and some areas bad. But that was the opinion he gave me, that anybody coming might be concerned about the retributions of speaking openly about the situation.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I've got a question actually about collections rather than deliveries. I'm in one of the villages as well, in West End, and our collection box time has changed from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. the following day. So as a business owner, when I'm posting something at the end of the day, it's now going to take an extra 24 hours to get to the recipient. We do have a really good postie. He collects actually from the door now, again in the morning. But I just wondered whether there is any plans to bring back the 5 p.m. collection rather than the 9 a.m. collection the following
Sorry,
day.
could you just repeat the postbox in particular it was?
GU24, it's actually at High Street, West End.
Okay, so I'd have to take that question away because the collections is on another phase, so I'm deliveries.
Right, okay,
so we've
sorry,
got deliveries
didn't
and
realise.
we've got a collections and distribution manager. I do understand what you're asking the question around, but I couldn't give you the answer personally. So we'll take it away and we'll write back to the committee for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Noble.
Thank you. You mentioned you had a recruitment gap of about 120 people at one point. Are you now recruiting on a rolling basis to make sure that you don't have these sorts of figures of vacancies again?
Yeah, so good question, Councillor Mears. So ultimately, yes. So it's a case-by-case scenario. In some areas where it's hard to recruit or harder to recruit in the GU area, then yes, we are implementing rolling recruitment. We have to be careful of that because it can get costly. However, in some areas, it's fine. You can put your applications up and you'll have somebody in the door within 2 weeks. We have closed that gap very largely and considerably, which was shared with Michael, and it's having the effect as in with our results. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm in the GU19 and GU20 area, so not covered by the Camberley Delivery Office, but I'd like to put a shout out to my postie as well. She's absolutely brilliant and goes well beyond the call of duty to make sure we get our mail. A quick question on something you just mentioned about the private health provider, Health at Hand. I think that's the one my employer uses as well, because we just can't get GP appointments, we can't get access to the NHS. Roughly when was it necessary to bring this in? When did the NHS deteriorate so much that it's now necessary? Thanks.
We brought that in because we had high sick. We brought that in so that people can gain access to get better quickly, really. Because if you have got a workforce that is ill, you're not productive, and then you lead to potential situations that we have maybe had in Camberley. It's a service that is fantastic because it's 24 hours a day. So we are a 24-hour operation. So therefore, a postman or postwoman who's working in a night shift at Jubilee Mail Centre can be on their break and time the appointments for them. And it's for not just the employee, it's for the employee's spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, and for their children as well. So it's a really, really good service. And it's about getting our people back to work because people want to be better and they want to come to work, don't they? So,
yeah, I can definitely agree it is a good service. But my question was, roughly when did you feel it was necessary to bring this in? Last year or 2 years ago?
We brought it in, forgive me, I don't know the date, but I believe it was at some point in 2022.
Thank you.
But I can find out and write back to the committee.
No, it's okay, it's not necessary. Just roughly when, that was my question. Thank you.
I have another question for you. I know residents find the opening times from 8 till 10 weekdays and 8 to 12 on Saturdays not that helpful. And I wondered if now you had more staff, whether you were thinking about opening the sorting office for longer.
Okay, so I'll take that. So it would be dependent on the footfall in each DO. Is it costly for us to open it for an extended time period? And would the resource be viable? Keeping them doors open. Now we've got auto redelivery, which many of our customers are happy with. So we automatically redeliver for the next day. That has taken away a lot of the needs for the CSPs, is what we call it, customer service points. However, it will be a case-by-case scenario dependent on footfall.
Right, thank you very much for that.
Just one point on that, Madam Chair. I think when you come in to Camberley Delivery Office, you will see the racks and racks that once were full that are now empty. And so, you know, the majority of our items now are delivered what the customers want to their front door. And the only items that you would potentially see, the majority would be surcharges or would be customs or special delivery items which can't be, you know, delivered with a neighbour, or you have to be in to actually to receive the item.
Are there any more questions?
Thank you, Chair. It was a question around the practicalities of the tour that you kindly offered. I assume we get in touch with you to clarify dates and times and then a maximum capacity?
We're very happy to invite the committee.
Yeah.
But, you know, any councillor, you know, we're very transparent as an organisation, and when it comes to elected representatives, hence why we're here tonight. So, you know, if we want to do it as this committee, and then, you know, obviously if other councillors want to join, we can maybe do that at another time.
Thank you very much for that offer, because I'm sure we will take you up on that and we'll organise something so we can see that. And I think, to me, it does sound that things are improving, which I'm very happy with. And I now know who to get in touch with anyway if I'm not happy or my residents aren't happy. So...
But I think also I'd just like to say we're sorry again.
Yes, no, I accept that.
And, you know, you know, you will see a vast improvement as we continue, and then when you come in to the delivery office, and Michael Gove did say to us how he had comments from people who had written to complain how they had seen it, and which is very unusual for people to say when things have improved, isn't it? So it's nice to hear from you guys as well that it's improved.
Right. Well, I think then we'll go on to the next item. And thank you very much for coming, spending time with us. It's been good to hear. So, Gemma Taylor will be coming soon, but perhaps if Councillor Wilson is happy to give his report now, we'll do that first. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just make a few opening remarks and then take any questions, if that's all right. So it's been my privilege to represent this council on Surrey Police and Crime Panel since last June. The panel exists to scrutinise the performance of the directly elected Police and Crime Commissioner. The panel is designed to support the Commissioner and be as a critical friend to them. Although we scrutinise and can challenge the PCC, we cannot hold them to account. Only the electorate can do that at an election every 4 years. We can facilitate the electorate holding the PCC to account, however, by shining a light on their performance. This means that the panel has very little real power. For example, we recently voted against the Commissioner's proposed council tax increase, but we could not veto it because that requires a 2/3 majority. And even if we had vetoed it, the PCC could come back 2 weeks later with a new precept differing by 1 pence, and we could not veto for a second time. The weakness of the panel's powers is one of the reasons that the system of party political police and crime commissioners has failed so badly. The panel has 14 members, 1 from each of the boroughs and districts in Surrey, and 1 from the Surrey County Council and 2 co-opted independent representatives. It meets approximately every 2 months at Surrey County Council in Reigate during the day, and meetings usually last about 2.5 hours. There is an all-panel pre-meeting on Teams a few days before each of the physical meetings, where we decide on what questions we will ask on each agenda item. And this is then passed to the Commissioners' team so that they can prepare answers. The PCC is required to produce a police and crime plan. This is the current one. And this forms the basis of our scrutiny. So we ask, is the plan right for Surrey? Is progress being made to the objectives? And is it actually a plan, or is it just a collection of slogans with no real KPIs or method of making any progress towards any of them? We scrutinise the police's revenue and capital budgets and the office of the PCC's overheads. Surrey Police spends about £300 million per year and needs to find annual savings of about £18 million in the period of the MTFS. The OPCC's running costs have increased by 70% under the current PCC as staff numbers have increased to maximise public relations activities in advance of the PCC and general elections. The Commissioner is not involved in operational policing matters. That is the responsibility of the Chief Constable. The Commissioner holds the Chief Constable to account, not the panel. However, it's important that we understand what the key operational issues are, so we have a private annual meeting with the Chief Constable. And we've also received training at Surrey Police HQ in Guildford. Surrey Police is inspected periodically by HMIC FRS, that's His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services. The most recent inspection report was scathing, citing numerous important deficiencies, many of them carried over from previous reports which had not been corrected or had even got worse. In the 7 areas that the inspection report reports on, between 2021 and the most recent report from last year, 6 of these areas had deteriorated. So that's under the current Police and Crime Commissioner's watch. The new Chief Constable is addressing them in his plan for the police going forward. However, the PCC must take some responsibility for known problems not being fixed on her watch. For example, phone call handling and response times to emergencies were way below the required standard. Many serious offences were being wrongly categorised, and this was known about over a long period. Many of the failings were due to high levels of vacancies, particularly of detectives and contact centre staff. The government's Uplift project gave police forces an incentive to recruit as many warranted officers as possible for a few years, which is now ending. This meant that fewer PCSOs and police staff were recruited. There's also a high attrition rate among the new recruits. And this exposes the failure of the system of police oversight. Panel members have been pointing out these problems for years, but only the PCC can ensure they're fixed. This council, along with others across Surrey, has passed a motion asking the Home Secretary to scrap the system of police and crime commissioners. Surrey has shown that this system does not work. People here pay the highest council tax in the country for our police, and the performance has been inadequate. The current PCC has used the position to spread transphobia and promote herself as a future candidate to be an MP. In all my dealings with Surrey police officers and staff, I have been consistently impressed by their dedication, bravery and competence, and it is very frustrating that they are being let down by the system of oversight. Thank you. Happy to take any questions at all.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and I think we'd like to thank you for representing us on the panel, because it is a lot of work that you have to do. So thank you on behalf of us all for that. Councillor Mears.
Thank you very much, and thank you for representing Surrey Heath on the panel. So which Surrey Heath specific or Surrey Heath unique problems have you discussed with the PCC or the panel, and are you able to offer us a brief update on these specific unique issues to Surrey Heath?
Thank you. There are a few issues that are unique to Surrey Heath. One of them has been the shortage of PCSOs, and we've mentioned that to the Commissioner. I guess it's not unique to Surrey Heath. It's a problem that we have here in Surrey Heath. There's been another one. There's been a 25% increase in shoplifting, and I know that Inspector Taylor has been working on that with the Surrey Heath Safer Neighbourhood team, and so perhaps she can report on how that's going. I think they're probably the main ones. There's other issues that obviously are across Surrey that we've really been working on. We don't, as I said, we don't cover operational policing, but when we see failures or areas for improvement, we can work on them. And one of these that we've been directed by the National Association of Police, Fire and Crime Panels to address is the problem of force culture. So that's to do with vetting of police officers, misogyny, cultural misogyny in the police, that sort of thing. And we were going to be dealing with that in the April meeting, but that had to be cancelled due to concerns about the pre-election period for the election. So I was really disappointed that we couldn't deal with that, because I think that is something, confidence in the police is something that is really important. And I know it's something that Inspector Taylor's been working on as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm surprised there's not more, but I suppose the problems we do have are shared with other areas in Surrey, so thank you.
Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chair. You've spoken a lot about how you scrutinise the Police and Crime Commissioner, but the terms of reference for your panel also talk about working in a constructive manner with the post holder with a view to supporting the effective exercise of his or her functions. Can you give me any examples of how you've done that?
Yeah, we do. And as I said in my remarks earlier, we work as a critical friend. So it's critical and friend. So yeah, we have identified quite a few areas where we think we can help the PCC. One of them is, as I mentioned earlier, this police and crime plan. It doesn't have KPIs. There's no way to tell if progress is being made on the priorities. So we've consistently asked the PCC to work on that and come back. We made a number of recommendations at the last meeting to try and help the PCC improve performance, particularly on call handling. And call handling performance has now improved in the last just couple of months. So I think we are making constructive suggestions and recommendations to the PCC. I can recommend reading the public minutes of the last meeting, because highlighted there on each section are the recommendations that the panel makes.
Thank you. And yeah, I actually watched the last meeting in advance of this just to sort of get a feel for what you do. And it is a little bit Punch and Judy. But my question is, obviously, you've spoken personally quite negatively about the Police and Crime Commissioner. You've just called her transphobic in this meeting today. Are you able to be objective and constructive in your role, given that you clearly don't like the Police and Crime Commissioner?
I don't have any personal feelings one way or another for the Police and Crime Commissioner. I definitely don't like the system. And you say it's Punch and Judy. Well, it is, because it's party political post that's been created by the government. And that's really what we object to. So it is a highly political, the PCC is a highly political person. She's attempting to become the next Conservative MP in a safe seat. I wish her luck with that. And the Police and Crime panel consists of mostly 12 out of 14 are elected councillors. So this is what we object to. We want to turn it into a policing board, which then has full oversight. And Police and Crime panel, as I said, has very little power, real power to veto or change anything that the PCC does. But we have to do a job on behalf of the public, and we're the only ones that can do it. So we're representing the public, and we're the only ones that can do it in between elections. So we have to represent the public, and that sometimes means being negative. And we have to make sure that the Police and Crime Commissioner doesn't use that post to cause discrimination or fear of any individual groups in Surrey. So that's, if you say I'm negative, I am sometimes with the PCC, but it's nothing personal.
I think have Councillor Mears next.
Thank you. So we've heard that you're dissatisfied with the role and you have a dislike of the system. So can you help me out here in splitting the politics from the policing? Is your party fielding a candidate for Surrey?
Yeah, well, we have to, because we have to work under the current system. We're fielding a candidate for MP as well, but we don't approve of the first past the post system. And our candidate is Councillor Paul Kennedy. He is vastly experienced. He used to work as among other things, a barrister. He's worked in finance, and he has exactly the kind of role, experience and qualities that will be able to turn around the poor performance of Surrey Police, in contrast to the current incumbent who got elected saying that only a Conservative PCC would be able to change the really unfair funding settlement that Surrey Police has. We get proportionally the least central government funding. So the funding formula really discriminates against Surrey, and that's why we have to pay the highest council tax of anywhere in the country. So to promise that only a Conservative could change it because a Conservative government was in place at the time, that was a stretch. Nobody believed that at the time. But if she believed that at the time and the Conservative government is about to be replaced by a non-Conservative one, maybe she'll be saying that people should vote for a non-Conservative PCC to get a better financial system.
Councillor Wilson, perhaps you could stick to what the panel has done.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, I just wanted to gather whether you were satisfied enough with the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner to be able to publicly support a candidate. So thank you.
Right, Councillor Cope.
Thanks. Firstly, coming back to your previous response to me, you've called the Police and Crime Commissioner transphobic again in this chamber and then said you have nothing personally against her. I struggle with that because that would seem like something quite personal to me. But I want to just move on to something else you said in your presentation. And correct me if I got this wrong, but you basically said that Surrey Police are failing in all 5 out of 6 of the sort of metrics. But in the Peel report, it's a much rosier picture, isn't it? Because I think there are 9 criteria and 6 are adequate or good. So that sounds a rosier picture than one you've painted. Obviously, there's room for improvement, but I don't know where that 1 out of 6 figure came from. So I just wonder if you could expand on that.
Yeah, certainly. It was 6 out of 7, and what I did was I compared the 2021 Peel report to the 2023-24 Peel report on items that were reported in both. So there were 7 items that were reported in both, and 6 of them had deteriorated. For example, responding to the public had deteriorated to inadequate. And there were some items in 2021 that were outstanding. There was one that was outstanding. It's now only good, and so on. So there was 6 out of 7 had deteriorated, and that's under the watch of the current PCC. So that was what I was referring to. So yeah, you say the Peel report is rosier. The current Peel report is a scathing report. I recommend you read the forward to it. The inspector specifically says that the new Chief Constable has such a difficult job because of the state that Surrey Police has been allowed to deteriorate into under his report. That's what he found in his inspection. So the Peel report is not a rosy report. It's a real cause for concern.
Okay, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've heard the word Conservative used in the chamber so many times in one meeting in my life. Anyway, back to a question. A critical friend, I'm interested to see if that's something that obviously the Sarah Everard recent case, is that something as a critical friend that it's something that the board will be looking at as to see what can be done when employing new candidates, etc., of the police force moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really good question. I wasn't going to mention that case in case it triggered, but I did mention about the importance that has been placed on force culture and vetting. One of the hallmarks of British policing is policing by consent. So the police are the public and the public are the police. And it is vital that the police maintain the confidence and trust of the public and the cooperation. I was in Miami last weekend where they policing is by compliance, and there was a roadblock that caused a half-an-hour tailback, dozens of police cars and scores of heavily armed police just stopping everyone to see if they were drunk or whether they were driving or had any drugs. That's an example of policing by compliance. So the police have to maintain the trust of the public, and the case like the one you mentioned is a real danger. Although it was in the Met Police, it affects people's trust in the police, nationwide. And there's a police force called the Civil Nuclear Constabulary. So it's effectively a paramilitary force that doesn't have any kind of civilian oversight. Every officer is armed in it. And vetting that's carried out in that force seems to have allowed people to get through to become police officers, and their vetting was then accepted in other forces. And that is a real danger, and I really want to bring that up. And so, yeah, thank you for mentioning it.
Thank you. And this, I think, will be the final question, okay? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I contacted the Police and Crime Commissioner in relation to the distance that the police seem to be retreating from the community. First of all, they were based here, then Woking, now I understand in Guildford. In fact, even when they're now here, they're blocked off from the rest of the council. And I got a reply saying indirectly that the commissioner felt she was restricted in the action she could take. She had a very narrow responsibility that she could work on, and she was rather frustrated by that. And she didn't feel she could intervene on behalf of the community that have seen their police connection retreat from here to Guildford, essentially.
So have you got a question? Just a comment?
Yeah,
no.
Just a comment.
Okay. With that, thank you very much for fielding all those questions, Councillor Wilson, and for your report. And now we'll hear from Inspector Taylor about the work of Surrey Heath, please. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm not skilled in the use of these microphones. Normally my voice is just loud enough. Hi everybody. Thank you for having me here this evening. Eddie, are you gonna just scroll through the slides or? That one's fine for now. So, I just wanted to give you a little update, really. Sorry, it's a bit strange sitting with you behind me. In relation to our current staffing. So, based here at the council offices, you've got the Safer Neighbourhood team, which is the team that I'm specifically responsible for, and the wider neighbourhood policing team. So that's your response police officers that cover Surrey Heath. So they are actually based here within the council offices for this area. Within my team, we've obviously got myself, 2 sergeants, 6 police officers, currently 4 PCSOs, and an abundance of other specialist officers that we work alongside. And I've just listed some of the teams there to give you an insight. I appreciate, so the numbers on the left look small, but obviously we're backed up by lots of other departments and specialist officers and that response team that I mentioned. So a couple of movements lately. So PC Joe Howden's joined us, and he's now dedicated police officer for the 6 villages, because I know that some time ago, whilst I was off, you lost Paul Finnegan, who was in that role. Paul is back with us from his secondment at the moment. Although he's due to take up a new role over the summer, we have a replacement for him, so that will be a direct swap when that happens. I mentioned we've got 4 PCSOs at the moment. We've currently got 1 in training, and he'll be dedicated to what is called the North team, but basically the town centre is where I want him to focus his efforts to begin with. And we've got another new PCSO starting with us in April, and he'll be dedicated to the villages alongside Joe. So 6 villages will then have their own PC and PCSO, albeit part of the wider team. Some members of staff do remain on limited duties, but that is the nature of policing. Next slide, please. This is just an overview. Some of you will have seen this because I've presented on this before, but not at this meeting. So on the left-hand side, it's quite small up there, but essentially you've got the Western Neighbourhood Policing Strategy, which is given to me by my boss. And on the right-hand side, you've got how I've broken that down for each individual on my team. So essentially some minimum expectations under each of those headings. So engaging with communities, obviously vital in our role, and there's a minimum that I expect them to complete each month of 1 Meet the Beat style event and 1 other engagement event based on prevention themes, which I'll come to in a second. Problem-solving work we identify through meetings called People, Groups and Places, where we discuss those 3 things. And we need to be making sure we're utilising partners and volunteers effectively to help us with that. And then specifically targeted activity, so at least 1 planned activity per quarter agreed with their sergeant. I'm really trying to get the team to own these things themselves and be directly responsible themselves under each of those headings. So that's a bit about what this is about and the strategy that I've set for them. So I mentioned about prevention focuses. So alongside all of our normal daily business, I've split the year into 4, and these are some focuses that I've given the team. So when they're conducting those Meet the Beat or engagement events, what I want them to be doing, for example, in the November to January, well, I'll talk about February to April because it's current. So in this period, I wanted them to go and look at the data around fraud, cybercrime, perhaps drugs as well. Look at the areas in the borough where we're finding victims are suffering from those types of crimes and take their engagement events to those areas with the correct literature for that prevention topic. Rather than, for example, going to the same locations every week and seeing the same people. I want them to get out into the community where and speaking to the people where we need to prevent these crimes happening the most. So a lot of it is data driven, and again I'm putting that back on the officers and the PCSOs to find out for themselves, get out and know their community. So like I say, these are prevention focuses, so they're happening alongside all of our daily business and problem solving that's going on as well. Some of the things that we've been up to, so November to January we had a focus around burglary, vehicle crime and violence, and you'll see that these are linked in with the seasons and when we see rises and falls in these types of crimes as well. So we had engagement stands, the ad van in relation to knife crime and the amnesty bin that was out the front here. We conducted a knife test purchasing operation where 3 out of 8 of the retail units failed. White Ribbon Day was the 25th of November, so we marked this and had a stand in Frimley Park Hospital and the town centre. We had officers going around licensed premises and engaging with people in relation to that. The 16th and 17th of December, we ran Operation Hotfoot, which was a shoplifting operation focused on hotspot locations in the town centre and also some out-of-town retailers. Over 100 vehicles were stopped under our Drink Drive campaign in one night in December. We had 2 successful burglary prevention campaigns, which many of you in this room were part of. That was on the 21st of December and the 27th of January. And we carried out a taxi licensing operation on the 22nd of December and dealt with an unauthorised encampment at Minorca Avenue in Deepcut where 1 vehicle was seized and the unauthorised encampment moved on within 24 hours of arriving. February to April so far, some of the activity we've had, so County Lines Week takes place in March, we've just had that. But on the 6th of February, we conducted a County Lines warrant in Deepcut where £10,000 worth of drugs, cocaine, cannabis and ketamine were seized. 2 people were arrested, 1 remains remanded at the moment. And there's an ongoing problem-solving occurrence that we've started in relation to that specific block of flats. During County Lines Week, we've conducted Street a Week exercises around addresses where we suspect involvement of drugs or county lines. We've held drop-in sessions at the secondary schools so that the children can come and talk to us about county lines specifically, but any involvement in drugs or concerns that they may have. And we conducted an operation at Camberley and Bagshot railway stations, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Alongside this, we've already been holding our Meet the Beat events with the, and attended the, I think it was the Bisley Residents Association meeting. We've got meetings planned for Places Leisure Centre in the town, as well as at Ballard Court, and we've held one event at NatWest in the town centre as well in relation to cybercrime and fraud. And there's more of those activities ongoing. Like I say, they're down to the individual officers to arrange those. Later on this month, so at the end of March, we've also got Safer Business Action Day, which is again a national campaign specifically focused this time on working with the bids. So we have been doing that, and we've got something planned to deal with general concerns around antisocial behaviour and safety of shoppers in the town centre, which involves having a pop-up youth club to try and tackle the problems in a different way to what Hotfoot did back in December. So that's some of what's going on at the moment, and we'll have future plans for the rest of the year based under the headings that you can see up there. Next slide, please. So just a little snapshot of the activity of the Safer Neighbourhood team since the 1st of November. So police led 13 community protection warnings, 1 community protection notice, 3 partial property closure orders and 1 that's been extended, and 1 full property closure, 1 arrest for breach of partial closure order, 1 criminal behaviour order, 2 arrests for breaches of criminal behaviour order, and 4 premises warrants obtained. 2 have been actioned, 1 won't be because the person's moved address. Additional locations of interest at the moment, so where we've got problem solving ongoing. Our priority at the moment is Bagshot, particularly around Bagshot Green, for drug use and associated vulnerability with that. Moorlands Road, there's a neighbour dispute, and we've got some intelligence around drugs. Avenue Sucy, drugs and vulnerability. Brunswick Road, which I've spoken about already, which relates to the county lines warrant. And Woodland Glade, in relation to an aggravated burglary, which links to, we believe, drug use, and we've issued 3 community protection warnings there already. Around that, there's some wider work ongoing in relation to violence against women and girls, tool thefts, the wider race action plan, Op Annabelles, which is in relation to Lakeside and its current use, and there's potentially one other active county line in Surrey Heath at the moment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some statistics. Last 28 days, we've had 27 less reported crimes in total than the previous 28. The last 3 months, 2 more crimes in total, so nothing significant about that personally for me. Across the board, charge rates are up. These are the current solved outcome rates. So hate crime, 18.2%, domestic abuse, 19%, burglary, 7.7%, total notifiable offences, 13.8%, and vehicle crime, 4.3%. Obviously, those figures aren't brilliant, but they are on the rise, and I think that's the key here. It's already been alluded to that the new chief had his work cut out, shall we say, but he's come in and made some changes already, and that's included introducing investigative support to the frontline response teams. So essentially, we had a system prior to this where the frontline response would own their own investigations up to a certain level. There's only so much you can do whilst also responding to crime. So one of the big changes was to bring in investigation support. So whenever a suspect is now in custody, the ongoing investigation is handed over to that team to allow those officers, to get back out and respond to jobs, and a quality investigation and outcome to be done in relation to the suspect in custody. For the month of March, the force has been running Operation Marshall, which has been an intensive focus on outstanding suspects. So it's been utilising officers on duty, cancelled rest days and some overtime to go out and effectively arrest all of those outstanding suspects. So at the start of Operation Marshall, West Surrey, so Guildford, Woking, Surrey Heath and Waverley, had 948 crimes with outstanding suspects attached. Within the first 48 hours, 35 arrests were made. So obviously that's going to have had a big impact. Locally, we've been supporting this. So just last week, based on intelligence that a female was using a vehicle under the influence of drugs which came from Hampshire, she was then outstanding for assaults of a neighbour. We utilised ANPR data of when the vehicle was being used, and I basically got support from our roads policing unit to stop her while she was out in the vehicle. She was arrested for all of the outstanding offences in relation to her neighbour, as well as drug driving, having no licence and no insurance for that vehicle, and the vehicle was seized. So she can no longer commit crime in that vehicle. I mentioned that we conducted an operation with British Transport Police during County Lines Week. We had a passive drug stalk out with us. We were only out for 2 hours, Camberley Rail and Bagshot, in the middle of the day, so it wasn't 10 o'clock at night. We went out there for 8 hours, but in that space of time, we managed to arrest a male in possession of stolen meat and drugs. He was also outstanding for numerous theft offences from the Old Dean Co-op shop, and he's wanted on warrant for failing to appear. So we've served him a community protection warning as well to stay out of the borough. That was just one arrest. There was another arrest on the day for possession with intent to supply drugs, which BTP owned that investigation. So I was really happy with that, to be fair. 2 hours, 2 good arrests. And yeah, positive outcomes alongside other offences that we dealt with on that day. Next slide, please. Joint neighbourhood survey. This is just a little snapshot for you. Again, the figures, if you just look at them on their own, don't look good, but I'm quite pleased that actually Q3 we've seen an increase. Not many of the boroughs have, and we're well above the force average, which is at the top there, 72%. So we're currently sat for this question, taking everything into account, how confident are you in the policing of your local area? This quarter at 79%. With a year-to-date 77.9, again, well above the force average, and also above all of the other boroughs on the Western Division. So I'm hopeful that we can keep pushing forward and get that score back up to where we were at least the end of last year. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So specifically, I was asked to cover these topics. I'm not exactly sure what you wanted me to cover, so I've just gone into what I think in relation to these. So inclusivity, Vogue and the White Ribbon campaign. So just to add some context, forgive me if you know this already, but there was a big shift at the end of 2021 when the National Police Chiefs Council and College of Policing published the National Vogue Framework. This was born out of recognition that the harm caused to victims and society by violence against women and girls in all its forms, including but not limited to harassment, stalking, rape, sexual assault, murder, honour-based abuse, coercive control, is immeasurable. It's recognised that men and boys also suffer from many of these forms of abuse, but they disproportionately affect women. Therefore, as a police force, we must focus on Vogue and we must ensure our response is consistent. The offences that have been identified as carrying the biggest threat to women are domestic abuse, rape and serious sexual offences, child sexual abuse and exploitation, and tech-enabled Vogue, such as online stalking and harassment. What does that mean locally to Surrey Heath? So some of the things that we do, each day myself and the duty DI, so detective inspectors, we review all occurrences from the last 24 hours and discuss them at a risk meeting. This allows us to identify any outstanding risk and allocate resources appropriately. A recent example from Camberley was a male taking pictures of children on a bus. You may have seen it on local Facebook chat type groups, because the same male was also doing similar in Farnborough. With our intelligence department, we identified that it was the same male operating across the two areas, and managed to link him to an offence where a female was followed from work to her car in the town centre. Later on that day, we got him in custody. I regularly review street safe data and crime data to look at where the community are reporting feeling unsafe and look at whether a partnership approach can be taken to solve this. One example, which I know some of you will know is ongoing, is the M3 underpass, Broadway Road in Windlesham, where we're hoping that some of those measures will get put into place to make the area at least feel safer and be safer. We utilise antisocial behaviour legislation to support protecting women and girls. So, for example, 2-year CBO for a male approaching women in the town centre whilst he was intoxicated and making them feel uncomfortable. Every 2 weeks, I sit in a meeting where I'm expected to review crime data to identify areas for problem solving, where I review top 5 victims and offenders in Surrey Heath and the top locations that we need to target. And like I say, I'm held to account by that meeting, in that meeting every 2 weeks in relation to that data. And I've mentioned already that we took part in the White Ribbon campaign this year in the town centre in Frimley Park Hospital, and we're reviewing whether that's worthwhile running again next year and what locations we would consider. This time, rather than having a stand in the town centre, we know that alcohol can fuel violence, so we specifically went round licensed premises in the early evening hours and tried to speak to people directly and raise awareness of the White Ribbon campaign, but also violence against women and girls in general. A separate piece of work that we're doing at the moment, so having looked at the data in Surrey Heath in relation to VAUG to see if there are any anomalies in our data, I found that in the 11 to 17 age bracket, 50% of victims were aged 10 to 14 and 50% were aged 15 to 17. But the significant part was that 43% of offenders were actually female, not male. The vast majority were aged between 10 to 14. In 89% of cases, the relationship was non-intimate, with 33% being rivals. This has obviously instigated a piece of work for my team around working with young people to try and solve that problem, because I can guess why I think that might be happening, but we need them on board to tell us why it's happening and how we can solve it. So we're taking a positive futures approach to this and enlisting the help of some pupils at Tomlin Scope, and that also feeds into the pop-up youth club that I've mentioned at the end of this month. Next slide, please. I was also asked to comment in relation to hate crime and community relations as a result of the war in Gaza. So some context in terms of what we do around hate crime. So we record all hate crime and non-crime hate incidents that get reported to us. We add hate crime flags on our system in relation to faith, sexual orientation, disability, etc. So we make sure that they're all flagged correctly. So if we have repeat victims, we can easily identify those, and the same with suspects. We conduct what's called a hate antisocial risk assessment in each case, and that helps us determine the risk of each case. And that hate antisocial risk assessment, or we call it a HARA, is reviewed by my team, so the Safer Neighbourhood team, for any ongoing problem solving or support that we can give. And according to risk, it could be reviewed by an inspector. We also, at that point, look at the wider community impact to see if we need, for example, to do any more work in the wider community in relation to that hate crime. Inspector reviews are done as standard at 72 hours, 7 days and 28 days up until the point of filing, and if a hate crime is going to be filed, then an inspector has to also endorse that report. We've got a repeat victim policy in place, and again, I mentioned the 2 weekly meetings, so we have one for hate crime as well, where we review top 5 offenders and victims and also locations to see if there's any problem solving that we need to do in relation to those. Specifically in relation to the war in Gaza, we had Operation Tarlac, which was a national operation. Any intelligence regarding protest activity and community tensions since the October last year was fed in daily. Recently, that's just been stood down to weekly, but it can go up and down at any point. If there's a need, they'll bring it back daily. We assess intelligence locally, and that's through the daily risk meeting at 10 and 3:30, which I've already mentioned. We have had some protest activity, not in Surrey Heath, but in Woking and Guildford. It hasn't affected us so far. Nationally, I'm aware of Stop the War protests in relation to Barclays and Waitrose, but again, we haven't been significantly affected by that in our borough. The Force held an Engaging with Jewish Community seminar on the 27th of February for all borough commanders or the representatives to attend, where we provided with basically support directly from members of the Jewish community. They gave us an overview and information to help us when we're speaking with them, and told us basically how we can best support the community. I've also looked at our census data for the borough to look at how those communities are represented in Surrey Heath. And I've linked in with the faith leaders. They have my contact details. I haven't had very much come back, which I think is a good thing at the moment. But I've communicated details of schemes that are available to them in relation to how they can better protect their estate, and made sure they've got all that information if they need it. We've also got links with the mosque on the A30, especially as at the moment, obviously, we're in Ramadan. And I think I've probably spoken enough, so that's the end of my presentation. I presume there's time for questions. I don't know, I haven't seen the agenda.
Sarah, thank you very much for that, and thank you to all your officers and team for the work they do in Surrey Heath. I think we do all appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, have we any questions? Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Inspector Taylor, for that presentation. It was very insightful. Just a question on the statistics that you showed, that one slide with hate, domestic abuse, burglary, TNO and vehicle crime. Is there any trend to show that the spread of incidents has changed, or the pattern of levels of activity has changed, or is it fairly consistent?
Do you mean sort of crime in general? Or
no, in terms
of
of the split between hate, domestic abuse, burglary, TNO and vehicle crime.
When I looked at the figures for the total offences across the year, there wasn't a lot of change. Hence, I sort of mentioned at the start about in the last 28 days, and then there was a slight increase in the last 3 months. That's indicative of the year and the year-to-date figures as well. There isn't any significant rises across any of those categories. It's hard when giving just pure statistics because I don't know what you want. I'm happy to give more if there's certain areas that you want me to cover, but I've covered the areas that are topical at the moment and that I think are important to people, also that are covered under our 6 pillars. Burglary I've mentioned because I know that it's something that people are always concerned about. There have been burglaries in the borough recently, but it hasn't been significantly higher than any other year. Sometimes it can feel higher because we've had clusters where perhaps we've had one weekend where 6 offences have taken place and then we don't get any, or we don't get any clusters for a few weeks and then we might get a few more. So I think the feeling is more than what the figures may show. And the same with vehicle crime. We have been seeing tool thefts, for example, quite prominently, but so have every other borough, and actually regionally they're seeing exactly the same thing with the same MO, same modus operandi. So nothing is standing out to me as exceptional about this year compared to previous years. DA reporting continues to rise, but again, we expect that to continue to rise. The same with hate crime, we expect that to continue to rise, and we hope that's because people are getting more confident in reporting and are recognising these offences more and reporting. So, nothing significant.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Inspector Taylor, for everything you do and your team. You actually preempted my question with something you just said there. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how people feel safe is really important. Statistics on their own can be a bit dry without any context. In terms of the statistics, I don't know if you're allowed to do this or not. Is there any way to provide statistics where we're comparing wards within the borough within Surrey, Surrey Heath versus the national average? Because I think that kind of context will help people to understand. I mean, my hunch is that we live in a very safe borough compared to the national picture, and it'd be great if we could communicate that and people might feel a bit safer.
Essentially, yes. I can get lots of different statistics, so that's why sometimes it's quite hard to pick and gauge what different people want to sort of know about. So, yeah, I'm happy to give more if you just let me know what it is that you want. You know, in terms of burglary, for example, and I take burglary because I know the statistics at the moment. So we have 1.5 burglaries per 1,000 people in the borough. It's the lowest and almost the lowest of the entire force. But yeah, when I speak to members of the public or, for example, Neighbourhood Watch, the feeling around burglary is that it's a much bigger problem than actually it is. And I think that's because of the nature of the crime and how invasive it is. But it is still very safe, and the statistics do by and large back that up.
Perfect. I think that's the sort of crux of it. If we can present maybe even just the burglary number against the national average, I think that helps to put at ease some of that anxiety that we've got a particular problem here in Surrey Heath, if they can see that actually we're actually in a very good place.
Yeah, I'm happy I can follow up after this meeting with some more data.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Cope, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to ask for some more data as well. This is around violence against women and girls. There's been some national press coverage recently around Clare's Law, which allows individuals to, as you'll know, find out if their partner has a history of abuse. Mm-hmm. And there's been some commentary around non-disclosure and some people not getting responses. Do we have the disclosure rates for Surrey Heath, and could those be shared?
Interestingly, I looked at this recently because I've been working with Nick's team and Helen, I don't think she's here, Councillor Whitcroft. So looking at a potential campaign for later on this year. And one of the things I've suggested that we could look at in the campaign is, whilst it's important to highlight different types of domestic abuse, and you know you can never really do enough of that, one thing I think is underutilised is the DVDS scheme, so Clare's Law, the right to know and the right to ask as well on behalf of someone else. So I recently looked at the statistics for the borough and I did provide them. I can't remember them, so I can look them up again. That's not a problem. When I did some comparison work actually as well, and this borough wasn't massively below any of the other boroughs in Weston. There was some with more, but it's quite hard to measure, you know, because it's one of those things where it's either appropriate to ask or it's not. It wasn't like the figures were so low that I thought, oh my goodness, no one knows about this. But it was an area that we've discussed that actually the more people that know about that, and it's probably a more niche area that people don't know about that's available. So yeah, I can get the figures, and yeah, like I say, I've recently done it. It's something we've discussed as being an area we could potentially focus on before it would hit national press, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Mears.
Sorry, you may have mistaken me taking a drink for a question. I don't have anything.
That was an easy one.
Okay, Councillor Hode.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Inspector Taylor, for what you and your team do. I'm one of the councillors in Lightwater Ward, and I think you and I probably had a brief email correspondence a little while back after the tragic double fatality on Red Road in Lightwater. I think at that point, you said that your force were carrying out an investigation into that. And I just wondered really if we had a likely timeline on when you might have completed that and be able to give residents some thoughts on what happened and what possible things we might need to look at in the future.
Yeah, so this is kind of twofold, isn't it? Because there's the investigation in relation to the fatalities, but also the road itself, and it's the feeling, if I've got this right, in the community that it isn't a safe road, or the way that it's used makes it unsafe, which is probably fair to
that's
say.
very much the direction of my question is specifically the road aspect of it.
Yeah, so unfortunately that won't be concluded until the investigation is concluded, so it will be some time. I don't have a timescale for it, and I'm probably unlikely to get one, if I'm honest. I know that the report goes directly into Surrey County Council highways. With any potential recommendations, it will go directly in. So I can try and keep track of when that happens so that you know, because it probably won't get publicised that that's happened.
Okay, that will be appreciated. Thank you. I understand that you can't necessarily give a timeline on that, but I think residents will be very keen to hear what the outcome of that review is. So yeah, if you could let us know as and when we get to that stage, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm reliant on them telling me, but I will ask them to tell me.
Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, and don't feel you have to turn around. Firstly, I'm going to echo what the other councillors have said. Thank you for you and your team. And especially I'd like to thank you for what's happened recently on the Old Dean with the unauthorised encampment and the height of shoplifting in the co-op, and your team's work on that. So that's many thanks on that. Hate crime. I'm a governor at a school, and I've seen hate crime figures at the school have increased in the last probably 2 or 3 months. And obviously you said about a slight increase here. It would be interesting on stats again, I'm sorry, an 18.2% increase. What is that as a number? Is that, because 18, if there was only one before, then 18.2 is not a very big. So is there any way we could get some figures again, not necessarily now, but an idea of what that is in real numbers? The same probably with domestic abuse as well, because I know that's obviously been on the increase, but some idea of numbers on what they are as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that 18.2% is the current solved outcome rate.
Okay.
So currently we're solving 18% of all hate crimes reported to us.
Okay.
We're anticipating that all of those will continue to rise as the measures put in by the new chief take effect down the road. And we're still obviously in the same year as not under his leadership. So just interestingly though, I know you are, did you say you're on the Board of Governors at Collingwood?
Yeah.
And so we have been working with Collingwood, supporting Collingwood in putting some measures in place to deal with, and there is no good way to say this, and I've tried to clarify this as best I can, but lower level hate incidents, where they don't perhaps cross over into crime, but they're almost microaggressions, but in a hate context. So trying to put a process in place for them to deal with those in-house in school to try and nip it in the bud before it does escalate, or those ideologies continue to grow. And that's working with their EDI lead in the school. And we're hoping that, we actually had to cancel our meeting on Friday, but we're hoping that potentially it'll be something that if we get it off the ground, we can roll it out wider to all of the schools, and, you know, potentially it could go across Surrey. We don't know yet, but it's just getting a little programme in place, really, of trying to educate children before they end up in the criminal justice system. Because for me, not to say that all is lost when you're an adult, but it is very difficult to change opinions and perceptions of adults. But actually, if we focus on our children, they're the future, and hopefully, that's a good way that we can eliminate some of the hate crime.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Is that okay?
Yeah, just a good one.
Yeah, so on what you were saying, I'm chair of the Welfare Committee, so I see all the figures as they come in, and part of it, I think, is people reporting it, and I think that comes down to what you said as well. Are we getting more reports of hate crime because people are reporting it? and it's a difficult one because you don't know if people, is there more happening or is it more people reporting it, and is it being advertised more about it reporting it? I'm guessing you probably haven't got a feel for that.
I don't know is the answer. It's the same, with shoplifting. Obviously, at the moment, people are being asked to report. So, it's hard to know. Is there more happening or is there just more reporting? We know that hate crime with domestic abuse, for example, is historically underreported. So my feeling is that it's just more reporting rather than more happening. But I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think we will ever know. No. There's nothing telling me that there's more happening. It's not linked to a specific thing, for example. It's not linked to the war in Gaza.
Okay.
Or anything else topical.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll have to turn round even more because Councillor Wilson's got a question for you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Inspector Taylor, for your report. You had a slide on the Joint Neighbourhood Survey, so I just want to say congratulations on the high level of public confidence that your team has created in Surrey Heath. It must be genuinely just due to the work of your team. As you pointed out, public confidence in the police is down overall, but I think that's probably due to things that have happened outside of Surrey. And I mentioned earlier how important I think how important public confidence in the police is under the Pelion principles, and that ties into what you're doing on prevention of crime, because the mark of a successful police force is not about lots of activity locking up criminals, it's about preventing crime and making people feel safe, which Councillor Thompson mentioned earlier has been a big success here. So talking about linking into what Councillor Garrett just said about engaging young people, you mentioned the Positive Futures programme with 11 to 17-year-olds. So I was wondering, can this council is forming a youth council. We've done a lot of work on that. Just wondering if that youth council can help and be involved in the Positive Futures programme at all.
So I'm pleased to say that we are already one step ahead of that. And through Jane, we're linked in. We have asked for a slot with them to discuss the VORG problem solving. We're taking a Positive Futures approach. We're not doing a Positive Futures, trial as such, but we don't need to. There's nothing particularly unique for me about Positive Futures. It's just involving young people in the problem solving, which is exactly what we need to do to solve a problem about young people. And the Youth Council will form part of that, but it is also important to me that we actually ask the group involved. So what I don't want to do solely is speak to a group of kids that are already actively engaged and want to help. I want to speak to the kids that are out causing the ASB, and they're the ones that I want to tell me, alongside the Youth Council or a group from Tomliscote who may not be directly involved, so that we get all the views.
Thank you.
Councillor Rakes, please.
Thanks. Very brief comment and then a question. I was very pleased to meet a couple of your officers today and head aside and meet the beat, and it was a good chance to actually inform them about some fairly serious antisocial behaviour around the Halloween howler last year, which didn't seem to have been registered or anywhere. But so it was good to put them in the picture so they can keep a closer eye. My question was about burglary. The burglary statistics are pretty horrible, 7% being solved, and that's a national problem, I understand that. But I have had residents sometimes saying, well, the police don't really care about burglary. So can you give me any reassurance that in Surrey Heath, burglary is taken seriously and that incidents are properly dealt with?
Yeah. So I can give you some reassurance for Surrey wider, actually, because they should be dealt with in the same way across the force. So every burglary will be attended to. It may not be straight away because it will be according to the threat, harm and risk ongoing at that time. So if the offenders have left the scene, then that deployment won't necessarily be, for example, within 15 minutes. But every burglary gets attended by somebody. Forensics always get considered. So again, in the first instant, the victim may not know, but in the background, forensics is being considered on the report based on the information they've told us, and that may or may not result in a SOCO, or scenes of crime, attending the address, depending on the situation. There's also a proactive investigation team. They review every single burglary. They hold them on a spreadsheet because burglary is difficult to solve. And one thing that happens is when you do get a suspect for one burglary, we will then, for example, look at that suspect's phone, look at that suspect's financial information, and then try and place them at the scene of other burglaries, because that's why we then tend to swallow up lots of burglaries in one go. You don't tend to solve one at a time. Not for burglary, maybe for handling stolen goods, if you can't prove the burglary, but you can only prove the stolen goods part. But when we solve burglaries, we tend to solve them as a sort of job lot. It's a crime where they operate generally under one modus operandi. So what we're seeing at the moment, and again, it's not unique to Surrey Heath, it's across the force actually, is rear doors. And that's why the winter burglary campaign that we did was focused on patio door alarms or window alarms, because that's how they're targeting addresses. So it is going to be one group or combination of that same organised crime group committing those burglaries. It's less likely to be your opportunist thief that maybe we've seen in years gone by. And they will travel, they will change their number plates, they use high performance vehicles, they steal vehicles and use them in the burglaries, they steal the number plates and use them in the burglaries. So part of catching a burglar is luck. The patterns as well in the borough have been unpredictable. So we've tried to map areas, dates, times, days of the week to target our patrol activity. Very difficult because they're always one step ahead. And the road network around here as well makes it really difficult because before you know it, they're out of the borough, onto the next, change their vehicle, change their number plates. So it is difficult. And I think that's represented in the solved rate. But that's not to say we're not trying. We definitely take it seriously. We will attend every burglary, just maybe not straight away, which I know is difficult if you're a victim. We always consider forensic opportunities. I review every single one. In this borough, we also send the addresses to Neighbourhood Watch, and they also do a visit for us. So that's something we've instigated recently. So that's an extra level of reassurance and care. They'll hopefully then become involved in Neighbourhood Watch and receive some extra prevention advice that way as well. So yeah, we definitely care.
Thank you.
It's just very difficult to solve.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a question related to road safety, which is one of your objectives. Mm-hmm. Edward Avenue is one of the cut-throughs onto the ring road. And I talked to a couple of your PCs some months ago, and we were going to have a meeting about it in a nearby church, but they didn't come back to me. I'd arranged the meeting. Then about a week ago, I talked to another couple of PCs, but I've heard nothing since. It's quite a unique situation that everybody in this particular road, it was the first thing they mentioned, because cars go down there towards the ring road at an incredible rapid rate, and they really are suffering quite badly. Is there any chance of resuscitating that and getting some action on it?
Are you able to tell me who you spoke to?
Sorry?
Do you know who you spoke to about
I've forgotten. I was trying to recall to the two female PCs I was talking to, but I couldn't remember the name of the person.
Okay. Were they response officers?
Yes, they actually came out and looked at the situation, and we agreed that something should be done about it. I know that the county is actually building at the intersection, on that road, building a platform. It may or may not happen with the county. You're never quite sure. So, something should be done to stop them speeding because they're suffering quite badly, and children suffer from the speeding cars.
Yeah, sadly, obviously, it's the case for many locations across the borough. We could easily be out every single day with speed cameras. But obviously my team specifically who are trained in doing that is only small in number, so there's a limited amount of opportunity for us to do that. If it's an area we can focus on in May and June, then we will, absolutely. But the trouble is it will be a one-off in terms of, we won't be able to do it every week. It will be, maybe every month at best. And I'm just being completely honest. If there is a problem with that, speeding down that road, then longer term solutions need to be looked at, which are bigger than just the police and enforcing speed on that road. So I can take that away. I'm not sure who it would have been that you spoke to. I've got a feeling it would have been response officers who are not in a position to follow that up with you without speaking to my team. So I'll take it away and see if anyone's aware. If not, I'll try and get someone to contact you about the campaign in May and June.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions at the moment. So thank you very much for coming and for all your answers. And I think some people are after some more statistics or data. So
yes, I'll send those through to
Yep, and he can then distribute them to us. Yeah, well, thanks very much. Okay. Right, so the final item is the work programme. The items that we've got are the revenue grants performance presentations for the autumn meeting, Accent coming probably next meeting, okay, in June, or whenever it is, and perhaps have the Surrey Police back in the autumn. And then the other one that we might have try and get for next time is the Frimley and all the Surreys and Borders integrated care boards. Okay, we might want to wait with the Frimley ICB until we know a little bit more about what the plans are for the hospital. Now, are there any other suggestions, anything else that you would like us, any other people you'd like us to get before you? Yes, Councillor Noble.
I'm sorry I say this every time, but if we're having Frimley in, can we also have Heartlands as well, please?
Any other suggestions? If you do think of anything, then you can always get in touch with us and we can try and bring those people in before us. So I think that's everything, isn't it? Yep, well, thank you all very much for attending and for all your good questions. Thank you.